This walk, approximately 5 kilometers long, will take you around Pukekura Park and Brooklands, identifying most of the major features of the park, and give an insight into their history. Moderate fitness is required and there are some inclines. Some of the tracks encountered may be slippery if wet, and appropriate footwear is recommended. We start our walk at the Liardet Street entrance. This imposing entrance gate was built in 1938, using funds from the Charles Score Sanders bequest. As you walk through the gates, pause for a moment. On your left is the Sportsground. In 1875 this was a swamp. Reclamation of the land started in 1881. If you turn around and look down Liardet Street, you will notice the houses on either side are elevated. To get Liardet Street to the level it is at today, several thousand cubic yards of material were removed, a lot of which was carted into the Sportsground in the 1880s. Walk down the road until you reach an opening on your right. In front of you is the Bellringer Pavilion. This is an interesting building. Originally built in 1924 as a single-story quaint structure, designed by renowned local architect Thomas Bates. It had a second story added in 1956, designed by Ted Borrell, and it was again extended in 1988, bringing the front wall out, and adding the toilet block at the far end of the building. The original Bates building is still intact behind the current frontage. We will take the path to the right before the pavilion and you will pass a small ticket box on your left. It is one of two that were constructed in 1931 by the Sportsground Committee. Turn right as you pass the ticket box, and you are now on Smith Walk. This is named after Walter Smith, who was curator of the park from 1908 until 1920. Walk past Fountain Lake on your left, briefly stopping at the landing jetty. Look carefully and you may see several eels. Continue down Smith Walk. After approximately 80 meters, you will see a bridge on your left. Walk onto the bridge and you will hear the sound of water. You have reached the Waterwheel. This was opened in 1976 in time for the park's 100th anniversary. The guts of the wheel originally came from an old dairy factory at Omata, just outside New Plymouth. The wheel was restored by Fitzroy Engineering and Jones and Sanford. The preparation of the site, which was a huge job, was done by park staff. Unfortunately, the wheel was constantly causing problems, and was replaced in 2004 with a new one. Continue walking over the bridge and into the children's playground. The original equipment, including an old-style merry-go-round, was installed in 1953. There have been a number of updates since then. Staying on the path to the right, stop when you reach the cross path. Turn to your right and you will see the Lower Victoria Road entrance. These wrought iron gates were donated by George Rind in 1885. They were originally at the Liardet Street entrance, but were relocated to this site when the new Liardet Street gates were built. Coming back from the gates, immediately after the toilet block, take the path to the right, up the hill. After a minute you will reach the Torii Gate, and the Japanese hillside below you on the left. The hillside was developed to celebrate our sister city relationship with the city of Mishima. The planting started in 1993. Continue on the path up the hillside, and you will soon come across a lookout on your left, where you can enjoy the view across Fountain Lake. Further up, bear left when you meet the track at the top of the hill. The area to your right was the location of the Carrington Road Redoubt, and later the location of the first Curators House, built in 1877. A few meters down the track you will see a house. This was built in 1930 for Thomas Horton, who was the curator from 1924 until 1949. Now take the steps on the left, heading down the hill. When you reach the bottom, you will encounter our impressive Moreton Bay fig tree. Continue past the fig tree for a few steps and you will reach the waterfall. In the late 1960s and the 1970s, there was a focus on developing water features. The waterfall marked the first phase of the development. Ian McDowell, who was a talented artist as well as being a knowledgeable plantsman, came up with an artist's impression of a cascade. The fall was constructed of boulders, set in concrete as naturally and as unobtrusively as possible. The bank allowed for a total drop of about 10 meters, broken up into 4 separate cascades, the uppermost, violently turbulent, the lowest a broad tranquil water curtain. It was completed in 1970. Another 150 meters along the path by the lake we encounter the Poets' Bridge. Originally built in 1884 at a cost of £155. The money was donated by board member James Davis. He won the money on a horse sweepstakes. The horse was called the Poet. There was a big opening day for the bridge, and the mayoress who did the honors, christened it the Poets' Bridge. Leaving the bridge behind, follow the path for about 200 meters, staying on the level. You will encounter a stream. This is one of the original streams feeding the lake. Take the steps just beyond the stream. After a couple of steps, pause and turn around, look toward the main lake. The narrow strip of land in front of you, covered with trees, used to be Manhattan Island. It was man-made in 1899. Turning around again, continue up the steps and into Goodwin Dell. This is named after Jack Goodwin, who was curator from 1949 until 1965. Walk across the grass, and take the path at the far side next to the seat. Follow this path straight, as it crosses another track. On your right on top of the mound, was the Wiggins Memorial, which was removed in the 1930s. Continue on until you reach the huge multi-trunk kofi tree. Pause for a moment. In front of you is the rhododendron Dell. This was also the location of a boxthorn maze, planted in the 1890s by Archibald Hood. The path straight ahead represents the original boundary of Pukekura Park. To the left is the original park you have just walked through, and to the right is Brooklands Park, which you are about to enter. Brooklands was gifted to the town in 1933. Next stop, Kunming Garden. At the kofi, take a sharp right and walk up the grass path. When you reach the concrete path on your right, take that path. This brings you to a car park. Bear right and start walking down the hill. After 20 meters, cross the road towards the white gates. To your right you will see the circular moon gate entrance to Kunming Garden. Take a stroll through the garden. The pagoda, the entrance gate and path were all built by craftsmen from Kunming. This was a gift from the mayor of Kunming to celebrate signing a sister city agreement. Check out the path, all the stones were individually placed. Continue by strolling across to the building next door. This is the Gables, built in 1848 as a hospital. It was originally sited on Mangere Road where the girls' high school is. It was built for Maori and European. During the Taranaki Wars the building was used as a military outpost. In the 1880s it was converted into a refuge for old men. In 1904 it came up at auction for demolition, at which point Newton King bought it for £10. The building was dismantled, all the rotten timbers were restored and the house was rebuilt at this site. The building is made of rimu, milled locally. Continuing the tour. Exit through the gap in the hedge and walk across the grass. You will pass a house on the right. This was built by Newton King for his son, in 1925. It is now used as an environmental hub. Immediately past the house on the right is the Brooklands Zoo. This is a children's zoo and free to enter. Stage 1 of the development was a bird cage built by the Jaycees, which was opened in 1965. Different features of the zoo were added subsequently. Have a wander through if you have time. Follow the path past the Brooklands sign. You will see a plaque on the right dedicated to Newton King, who was a very successful stock agent. He moved into Brooklands in 1888. In his will, Newton King left a large sum of money to the town's reserves. The trustees of the estate offered 53 acres of land in lieu of the money, which was accepted by the different beneficiaries. Another 100 meters into Brooklands, you will come across the old fireplace. This was part of a house built in 1842 for Captain Henry King. He was one of the representatives of the Plymouth Company, and the first commissioner of New Plymouth. The house was burnt down in 1861 during the First Taranaki War. Continue on the path. Just before you enter the bush, you will see an old walnut tree on your right. This tree has over a dozen epiphytes growing on it. Another 100 meters into the bush, you will come across an opening on the left which leads to the Old Puriri, said to be 2,000 years old. Have a walk round this amazing tree. Leaving the Puriri, keep on the small track that goes down the hill. When you reach the bottom, cross the bridge. You will see a set of steps to the left. These lead to the giant Ginko. If it is wet, this track will be muddy. If you wish to take a detour through native bush, don't cross the bridge, instead take the track to the right. This goes through the Maranui Gully. It will add approximately 1.5 kilometers to the walk. Next stop is Scanlan Lookout. Coming back onto the track after viewing the Ginko, turn right onto the track. Continue walking until you reach the gates. Turn sharp right and head up the sealed road towards the racecourse. 10 meters past the Big Puriri, take the small track on your left, stop when you reach the lookout. On a clear day you can see Mount Taranaki. Leaving Scanlan Lookout, continue on the track. When you reach the sealed road at the bottom of the hill, turn right, which will take you behind the Bowl of Brooklands. The bowl was constructed in 1957. You can wander onto the stage if you wish, otherwise continue on the track behind the bowl. After 50 meters you will see the Lily Lake. Keep on the track to the right of this lake. In the lake at the far end you will see a sculpture. This was donated by Michael Smither. It is called Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud. Past the lake there is a wetland on your left which you can walk through, otherwise stay on this track. Continue on the same track for about 200 meters until you reach the Boatshed and Boatshed Bridge. These were both originally built in the mid-1890s and both replaced in the 1950s. The bridge had to be replaced in 1953, after it suffered a catastrophic collapse when a rugby team from near Matamata was stood on it. Thankfully no one was seriously injured. Resuming the walk, keeping the main lake on your left, after 200 meters you will reach the tea house. This was built in 1931 as a gift from the ex-mayor of New Plymouth, Charles Burgess. He and his wife were celebrating their golden wedding anniversary, and decided to mark the occasion by building the tea house. Before building could commence, an old bathing shed had to be moved. This changing facility was built in 1879, soon after the formation of the lake. Since the early 1910s, the shed had been used as the curator's toolshed. Continue by taking a sharp right turn at the tea house, and walk through the cutting. As the path bears right, on your left there is a small tree with variegated leaves. This is a native parapara or bird-catching tree. Its seed pods are extremely sticky, and if small birds come in contact with them they are at risk of getting tangled up and not being able to escape. A further 50 meters along the track you will see what looks like a banana palm. This is in fact a giant bird of paradise. Follow the track to the right of this plant, past the small lily pond, and you will exit Stainton Dell at the Parks Administration Building. At the far end of the admin building, turn right to find the entrance to the Fernery. This amazing building was opened in 1928. Cut out of the side of a hill. It houses approximately 50,000 plants. Have a wander through and exit at the top, out of the tropical house. After exiting the Fernery you will come onto Horton Walk. This is named after Thomas Horton, who was the curator from 1924 until 1949. The trees flanking this walk are mainly totara, rimu, and kauri. This was Horton's first major planting, soon after starting at the park. Walk down the path and you will pass a building on your right. This is the old Curator's office, built in 1952. The adjacent building is the ladies' changing room, built in 1948. A few meters down the road swing left up towards the main lake. The first feature you come across is the Queen Victoria drinking water fountain. This dates back to 1897. It was made to commemorate Queen Victoria's 60th Jubilee. Next to this is the Band Rotunda. The concrete base was finished in 1887, and was first used at Queen Victoria's 50th Jubilee celebrations. The posts and roof were erected in 1891, in time for New Plymouth's 50th Jubilee celebrations. The hill behind the rotunda is called Cannon Hill. On the opening day of the park, this was the center of the ceremony and was probably the only piece of the park that had been semi-developed at that time. It got the name Cannon Hill in the 1890s, after some old cannons had been mounted on top of the hill. Continuing our walk, head towards the waterfall. 10 meters from the rotunda, take the path on your right that goes down to the hatchery lawn. This area was developed in the early 1880s with fountains and a lily pond. In the early 1900s, fish rearing pond were constructed by the Acclimatization Society. Then in the early 1920s the Acclimatization Society built a trout hatchery. This operation ceased towards the end of the 1920s. Our last location to visit is the Queen Elizabeth Fountain. This was completed in 1955. At the time, the fountain was considered state-of-the-art. It played 2 or 3 times a day, and the times were advertised in the newspapers. It could draw very large crowds at night. This concludes our trip round the park. Continue down this path for 50 meters and you are back at the Sportsground.